All right, it's Oracle versus Seli on which map? Which map will it be? We can't tell. There's so many to choose from. Oh, look, it's Death Aura. GLHF indeed. So, Seli, Terran, bottom right. Oracle, Zergonet in the top left. Yes. So far, so normal. Yeah, Overlord in production. What I typically expect to see is when the Overlord pops out, there will be 3 larvae. Turn all of those into drones, rally one of them to here to go hatch first. That would be a very standard opening, but that's not what it is. It's an overpull opening. Interesting. I don't know about the Overlord if you're going to do this. You know, go up to 14 and arguably drop the pull, build another drone, and then Overlord, possibly Extractor Trick Overlord. But anyway, that's what he's done. So it is an early pull. You know, pull first is early. Seli, however, is working on a wall. Hasn't scouted yet. Has got gas building, so is probably thinking of a Reaper. There is going to be a full wall here, so he should be okay against early lings. Now, obviously, it can still be frustrating because you send a worker down to drop your expo and the expo can get sniped or whatever, but you know, should be okay, should hold, shouldn't lose the game to some early lings. Only 2 lings in production so far, and yeah, Extractor coming down now, so I don't know if this is actually going to be a particularly aggressive opening, and yeah, 4 lings, you know, but idle larvae, you'd think, and look, workers in production. So only 4 lings coming out in the end, so it isn't going to be any sort of properly sort of cheesy push, which does sort of beg the question: why bother with the pull first? I'm not really sure. There is going to be a Reaper coming out and heading across the map. And hopefully the Reaper is, you know, you want to keep the Reaper under control. You don't want to lose it. 4 lings, you know, if they surround the Reaper, I guess 4 lings can kill the Reaper. Reapers are pretty squishy. And that, you know, they don't kill lings particularly quickly or anything. But they're fast, you know, until speed is out. A Reaper is much faster than a Zergling. Excuse me. So, you know, the Reaper can just kite backward and forward all day long against lings. You shouldn't be losing it to lings at all. Has stopped at this location, so Seli just having a bit of a think about where he wants to go in and scout, but hopefully we'll see that going soon. The Queen will be able to, you know, push the Reaper back ultimately, so I'm not going to get any kills or anything like that with this Reaper. It is literally just going to come in and have a quick peek and see what there is to see. And what it sees is all pretty normal. There you can see how quickly the Reaper can just run from the lings. So, you know, if you can be bothered, you can like stop the Reaper and dance backward and forward and kill these lings. But you know, it would take a lot of APM, so it's probably best avoided unless you are confident that you've got a lot of spare APM. It isn't worth, you know, it's not worth killing like 2 lings or something at the expense of macroing a ton. So Seli going for the CC on the high ground. Given that he's got the Reaper on patrol here, he's going to see when anything moves out. Pretty safe to move this down. Commonly with the move out, you would see a couple of SCVs come down, plant maybe supply depots and new barracks down here to make a start on a wall, so that then if you see the lings coming out, all you've got to do is plant a bunker in the gap or whatever, and you'll be absolutely fine. So factory is done, and I'd expect there to be a siege tank appearing in production pretty soon. Starport is coming. Oracle momentarily supply blocked, goes ahead and builds 4 overlords to deal with that. So I'd like to see these lings out being busy on the map, to be honest. You know, go across the map and see, is there anything that you can get done. You know, this is the time that a Terran will have moved their command center, that their CC will be up and starting to mine. You know, so if you can get some lings into this mineral line, you can put some hurt on, maybe snipe a mule, maybe snipe 2 mules. You know, bear in mind a mule in its life mines about 250 minerals. You know, so if you can snipe these 2 mules, you've just cost your opponent 500 minerals. Once the siege tank gets set up, though, you know, the chances of getting value out of these lings is greatly diminished. Because the splash damage from the siege tank is just so effective. So where are we at? Medevac in production. Everything looks okay. It looks pretty normal. There is a second barracks coming down, so it's a 2-1-1 build. There's still workers in production. Everyone happy. On Oracle's side of the map, a nice worker lead that you would expect. I'd like to see the third coming up. That's a pretty interesting infestation pit. I'm not sure if he's got something in mind with that. To be mutating a hive this early in the game is really unusual. In general, there's a reason that you don't generally get a hive this early, and the reason is you're only on 2 bases, and hive allows tier 3 units and 3/3 upgrades. There's no way you've got 2/2 done by this early in the game, so you don't need your 3/3 upgrades, and the tier 3 units, you just don't have the income for it when you're only on 2 bases. You don't even have all 4 gas fully saturated at this stage. So the third has been dropped, and that's a little bit more like it. So I'm kind of curious about what the hive is going to be for, whether that's just a bit of an EMS noob league hive, or if it is for some particular function. A lot of lings on the map now. Look at this, there are 46 lings on the map. Defensively, not great. I'd love to see these across the map. There's very little, look at the vision here for Oracle. Hasn't a clue what his opponent's doing. So if Seli turns up suddenly with like blue flame done on some Hellbats, these lings evaporate so badly. So continuing to produce lings when you've no idea what's waiting for you is a bit of an odd one. Well, Ultra Cavern coming down, so that's the reason for the hive. Reaper very quickly gets surrounded, so let's see what sort of reaction we get. I'd love to see these Widow Mines out the front burrowed. Just drop this and get the Widow Mines here, because they could literally just wreck all of the lings. I think we're about to find out how badly these lings fare against siege tanks. Upgrade wise, it's +1 attack done for the lings, but no carapace. So if they try and push in here, they're just going to get utterly obliterated like that. Yeah, that's the power of splash damage. Look, that siege tank with 20 kills, this one with 17. That was an expensive mistake. 30, yeah. Okay. That's a lot of dead stuff, isn't it? 56 in the end. Wow, 56 dead units is pretty fierce. Now bear in mind lings sort of double up, so still though 28 dead lings, 28 dead things, if you like, is still pretty expensive, isn't it? So yeah, don't do that. Ultralisks on the other hand are a different breed. Ultralisks are pretty hardy. The scan sees the Ultra Cavern, doesn't it? Sees it. So that is a money scan right there. Sees that the hive is done, sees the Ultra Cavern. So once you know that this is coming, what do you build against ultras? I mean, yes, siege tanks are good. They pack a heavy punch. You do need, there's no point building marines against ultralisks. They just don't work. That's not to say you don't want to still have some marines in the mix, because the ultras probably aren't on their own. But nonetheless, you don't really need marines. So feel free to continue to build marines so that you can drop them out of medevacs in here and try and pull your opponent apart. But they won't really put hurt on ultralisks. So siege tanks, good for sure. Ooh, you don't want to drop in here. Liberator's very good. Oh no, that is just painful, isn't it? No, I bet that positioning with the Hydras at the back there, like, was that a lucky position, or was that a kind of well thought out? I suspect there could be a drop here. Hard to tell. If that second medevac full of Marines is with this tank, it's just so much harder to get on top of it like this. But so many lings here. Ultimately, the drop doesn't really achieve so much. So, Oracle well and truly ready for that drop in the back there, and that was a bit painful. That has evened things up a bit. in terms of losses. The units killed look very different, but if I look at the resources lost, it's very, very similar for both. But lings are cheap, medevacs and tanks are not. So as I was saying before, Seli, if you know Ultralisks are coming, siege tanks good for sure, Thors good, Liberators good. You need things that pack hefty punches because the Ultralisks have so much armor. Widow mines can be very useful as well, but you kind of need to know this is coming. The tanks are just about the tanks get sieged up. The problem is when the lings get on top of your army, splash damage from the tanks is going to be doing quite a lot of damage to your own units. It's not well managed from Oracle though. The lings have turned up on their own out front, and now the rest of the army is going to come forward. Yeah, he does need to pull this back and then stim this stuff forward again. The Widow Mine needs to burrow, hasn't yet, but it does look like Seli's army is just going to basically crush here. The Ultras do have the Countless Plating upgrade, but no additional armor on top. So that definitely a bit painful from Oracle's point of view, and just kind of reinforces just how good siege tanks are at defending stuff. So a pretty meaty grinder there. The 1-1 Marines with Stim, again, they've got a high DPS against pretty much everything, but armored things like Ultras, not so much. So the Lings, of course, against those 1-1 Marines will be taking a bit of a pisting. There are no carapace upgrades done as yet. Production goes quiet for Seli, and that is because he is pushing across the map. Needs to be a little bit thoughtful about how he sets this up. There are a couple of Marauders up at the front here, and that's good to see. They'll withstand a few shots from those Ultras much better than the Marines. Needs to get these tanks up into siege mode, but once the Lings get on top, the tanks are probably better off not sieged. They do have a slightly higher DPS, but the Ultras are going to work here and putting a lot of hurt onto these Marines. So just see the kills racking up on the Ultra as it plows through this batch of Marines. And Seli's going to have to get out of there with the medevacs. A bit back and forth. With the siege tanks sieged up, arguably the Lings die before they get on top of the Marines, and then maybe you can start step micro against the Ultralisks while they're taking fire from the siege tanks. But on creep, you don't want to be engaging these Lings at all. If you can avoid it, you want to do your engagements off creep. So to push this location, ideally you want your siege tanks tucked into these corners so that the Lings can't get a surround on them, so that the Ultras can't get surface area on them. And then poking forward with a Marauder heavy mix would be very nice. Some Thors being built, and this is all good. So far I'm liking what I'm seeing. Oracle now up on 4 bases, which is good, but our Terran player is also on 4 bases, and in general as Zerg you always aim to be at least a base ahead of your opponent. That's kind of how Zerg needs to play. So Oracle really could do with another base. I do notice that both players have kind of stopped worker production, and arguably they're a little bit shy of the sweet spot. Neither of them are kind of saturated on those 4 bases. But these are essentially minor gripes. Seli, floating a fair amount of minerals, needs to get these. I don't know if it's a missing hawk here or what, but these barracks have gone quiet. If he is aiming to switch into mech, which isn't a bad call against the Ultras, then he's going to need more factories. He's going to need more starports. He's got enough medevacs, which is great. I'd like to see them busy, because the Marines don't have that much utility, as I mentioned, against an Ultralisk heavy army. So I'd like to see them busy, just dropping them in here, lift and drop here. That type of annoyance can be absolutely great. A 2-level drop where you can abuse this cliff You know, when your opponent's army comes to get you on the high ground, you just drop back down to the low ground with the medevacs given sight, and all of these melee units can't really do anything to you. Couple of Vipers in the mix, so it'd be really cool if we see some. Be really cool if we see Vipers being used in a useful way. Seli also moving on onto the map, and Oracle doing some roaming on the map back and forth. This is, you know, these are the types of things you need to be doing. I'd love to see these Lings running about the place patrolling. Seli, you cannot quite see this. I wouldn't mind seeing a scan ahead. Now that you've seen it, you know, these Liberators need to get into Liberation mode. You need a big array of Liberation modes, and they really start to put the hurt onto these. So here comes the engagement. A little bit of focus fire would help, but the Terran is in a pretty strong position here. The liberation zones just need reset or pull back into those liberation zones. The blinding cloud, though, was doing a fantastic job, so we did see the Vipers get used. And ultimately, you know, as I say, those Marines just don't really have much facility. And so he just taps out, which I think, you know, arguably, no need, like, you've got 7,000 minerals in the bank, 1,600. I think it was that pause in production, maybe, that was the serious problem. I mean, I appreciate there's a bunch of stuff turning up here, but you've got a reasonably well defended base. You've got, you know, substantial numbers of barracks that you could be building stuff, you know, a worker pool to repair on the front wall to try and keep stuff out with siege tanks behind it. I kind of feel that you know, you potentially could have held on, pulled the Liberators home so that you can get some liberation zones set up above this stuff as it tries to bust the wall. Anyway, it is GG. There you go.